First up, we have to approve the August minutes of August 19th, the minutes of August 19th of this group. And Michelle from the LCC let me know earlier that there was a change. We forgot to reference the Department of Labor and Industries presentation. So it has been added to the new minutes and that has been posted. So if Senator Murphy, if you'd like to make a motion to approve the August 19th minutes.
I move approval of the August 19th minutes, Madam Chair.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And the motion prevails. The minutes are approved. Today, we have a presentation from Commissioner Doty, which I'm very excited for because you always give us such great presentations, Commissioner. And then we have just 3 testifiers, and then we'll have a working group discussion. And if you noticed in your packet, there are also 3 letters that have been posted from some folks out there that wanted to send their testimony in. So first up, we will have Commissioner Doty, and I think you're able to get your screen shared. So take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks everyone on the committee. I want to have a brief discussion about tax considerations relative to frontline worker pay. It's not too long, but just wanted to put some stuff out here for us to think about. So let's jump into it. First slide, please. Thank you. So the first thing that I wanted just to start off clarifying is that the federal taxability of state payments is determined by the IRS or the Treasury. So the state really, we don't have control over taxability relative to the feds. So that's really, really important to note. And what obviously we do have control over is whether or not these payments would be subject to state tax. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So there are 3 questions as we look at this overall that I think we would want to ask ourselves. One is, does a federal tax exclusion apply to these payments? Does Minnesota conform to any kind of a federal exclusion? And does a state exclusion apply to the payments? So first of all, if there is a federal exclusion available, if the answer is yes, then the payments then obviously would be exempted from federal income tax. If there is no federal exclusion, then federal and state income tax would apply unless the state does something separate and would exclude it from state income tax. In terms of Minnesota conforming to a federal exclusion, if we do that, the payments then are exempt from both federal and state income tax. If we don't, then the payments are subject to state tax, again, unless an exclusion applies. And then finally, the whole idea of a state exclusion applying, if the answer is yes, then the payments are actually then exempt from state income tax. Next slide. So to start, because I know in this committee, in this working group, not everyone deals with taxes all the time and everything. So just wanted to start off just kind of from a really kind of a broad perspective. And I think the first place to start is what is the definition of gross income? And so for tax purposes, the Internal Revenue Code, obviously section 61, defines gross income as all income from whatever source derived. So again, everything, right? Any income received is gross income for both federal and state tax purposes, unless there is an exclusion. And if a federal exclusion applies, the payments will not be subject to federal or state tax if Minnesota is in conformity with the IRS code, okay? There are 2 broad categories of federal exclusions that I think it's important to look at. One is the idea of qualified disaster payments, and the other one is related to general welfare exclusions. So First of all, for qualified disaster payments, these are payments that are excluded from gross income that are received by an individual as a result of a qualified disaster, if you will, a declared qualified disaster, like potentially a COVID pandemic, potentially. And then there's the general welfare exclusion, again, which are payments that are made legislatively that are provided as part of a social benefit program. Okay, and then again, those would be excluded from an individual's gross income as well. So looking at closer the qualified disaster payment exclusion. So again, this must be the result of a presidentially declared disaster. And again, the COVID-19 pandemic was presidentially declared on March 13th of 2020. So from that standpoint, that would qualify. Number two, income replacement payments are not considered qualified disaster relief payments. And then finally, the payment must meet the definition of what is considered a qualified disaster relief payment. And again, I think like we just said, examples would be payments made to individuals for expenses incurred as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And they were made as a result of persons who were adversely affected by a disaster. So I think those would be things to think about here. Next, and in terms of the general welfare exclusion, number one, must be pursuant to a government program. So part of a government program, must be need-based, okay, and this is important, not represent compensation for services. Okay, so so that would be the second big broad category of federal exclusions. Next, look at the state exclusions. So Minnesota does conform with federal qualified disaster relief payments and the general welfare exclusions, but there are no specific state exclusions currently under Minnesota law that would apply. If the federal exclusion does not apply, then what needs to happen is that there needs to be a statutory change that would allow for for a state exclusion, if you will. And so several things we want to consider as we move forward with that. So number one, obviously we would be looking at having the payment excluded from state income tax. And again, even if it's excluded from state income tax, it still may be taxable federally. So again, I want to just be super clear with that. Just because we exclude something in Minnesota does not mean it's excluded federally necessarily. But so obviously we want to do that, excluded from state income tax. Next thing is we want to also exclude it from the calculation of household income. And this is important when we look in Minnesota, as we look at the state property tax refund, as well as like things like the K-12 education credit. These are items that have a separate household income calculation involved. And so we'd have to name that specifically so that it is not included in household income for these calculations. The other thing we want to consider is the impact of these payments on other state eligibility for other state programs. For instance, like the SNAP program. Again, any of these programs that would have an income threshold, we'd have to make sure that this payment wouldn't adversely affect people, if they took the payment. So, and then finally, particularly if we are looking at having employers distribute these payments, if that was the direction that we went to, then we'd have to make sure that that the payments were exempted from withholdings and those tax requirements. Next. And then just finally, a couple other not small, but a couple other considerations that we should just be aware of. One is the whether or not these payments meet the definition of premium pay under the ARPA funds definition. And my loose understanding of what that means is that, number one, that premium pay would be amounts that are paid over and above to individuals for over and above their normal compensation for responding to the public health emergency. Okay, and that the threshold, it sounds like, for what those amounts can be cannot be more than $13 an hour above what they normally would be making. And I will say we have a question in through MMB to Treasury to better understand this, because it does sound like this is something that potentially that this is where those funds are coming from. So we want to be clear on this point. And then finally, I think an obvious point is that if these are considered taxable, then we want to make sure that individuals were given a Form 1099 for their tax purposes. So that is kind of what I have. Like I said, not a long presentation, but again, I think that it sounds, if one of our goals really is to make sure that these were not taxable, at least from a state perspective, then we want to make sure that this is included with the legislation as we go forward, and noting some of the considerations that I listed previously. So with that, I'll open up, Madam Chair, to any questions that anyone may have. I'll see if I can answer those.
Thank you, Commissioner Doty. I do have a couple of questions. I don't know if other states have already distributed any of the ARPA funds or not. I know when we talked to Louisiana, it wasn't those funds that were used.
Right.
But have other states federally not taxed these federally? Do we know what they've done with the dollars? And I do think, and this is just me, but if we do start giving checks to these frontline workers, and it does, I don't think it's any of our intent to all of a sudden put them at a new threshold and then
Right.
they don't meet the SNAP requirements.
Yeah.
And then also, I don't want them April 15th to go, wait a second, now I've got to pay $100 on,
Right.
it's kind of like they're being penalized for being bonus. So thanks for bringing all that up. But is there any precedent out there at the federal level?
Yeah, Madam Chair, what I will tell you is that I'm not sure. We can look into that specifically. I know other states obviously have given out ARPA funds. I'm not sure we connected that to these frontline worker programs and then the whole idea of taxability. But we could look into that and get back to you and the committee on that. That's a great question.
Thank you, Commissioner Doyle. We wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. Maybe there's something out there.
Yep.
Senator Murphy.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks, Commissioner Doty. I am listening to you and following up then on the question from the chair. Is your presentation predicated on the source of funding being ARPA funds?
Commissioner Doty.
Madam Chair, Senator Murphy, not necessarily. I only added that comment at the end just because I know that had been part of the discussion. But in terms of general taxability or not taxable, no, that wouldn't necessarily be specifically focused on the ARPA funds.
And Madam Chair?
Senator Murphy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Commissioner. So whether we were to use ARPA funds or funds from the General Treasury, we would need to be clear in whatever legislation we pass about the treatment of the checks that would go to people. Is that correct?
Commissioner Doty.
Madam Chair, Senator Murphy, I think in general, yes. What I will say though, is that if we are using ARPA funds and then we do find out that there is this inherent exclusion in there, then that would impact potentially how far we would need to go in Minnesota to ensure that they were not taxable here as well. So I guess it all depends. It all depends. It depends on if we're using ARPA funds. It depends on what the how Treasury defines this or not. So my intention was really just to make us aware and as we go forward.
Senator Murphy, good.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks so much, Commissioner, for the presentation. That was helpful. My question is just for clarification so that we're all on the same page. If we do exempt these payments from taxation, is that going to create a fiscal note? And what are the potential funding sources then for that fiscal note? Is there money on the bottom line that can be used to pay for that fiscal note, for the costs associated? I don't know that any of us want to take money out of this $250 million and make this pot smaller, but I also am not sure that any of us want to see this money taxed for Minnesotans. And as you indicated, and as Chair Housley indicated, certainly we don't want this to put people in a category that is going to affect other programs that they might be able to take advantage of right now. So how exactly would that function if we do exclude these payments from taxation?
Commissioner Doty.
Madam Chair, what I will say to that question is that it's my understanding that that if this were done prior to the February forecast that is done, that then there would be no line item for this on the spreadsheet, if you will. But if it's done after that, after the February forecast, then there potentially would be a line item, and then there would be that would have to come with a revenue estimate, and then again, yes. But overall, yes, there would be a cost. So. And in terms of where the money comes from, that's a bigger question, and I don't know if I'm in a position necessary to answer that one. But I think the bottom line is it speaks to the speed of how we get these out, if you will, and but the idea that, quite frankly, nothing probably comes without a cost. So,
Representative New Brindley.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, good. All right, Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, so I guess my first question is, and I'm reading between the lines, but it doesn't sound like you are very optimistic about the chance that we would be able to qualify payments under this program for a federal tax exclusion. Could you just give us a little bit more commentary on kind of the likelihood of some sort of favorable federal guidance or opinion?
Commissioner Doty.
Madam Chair, Representative Winkler, you know, I really hate to give a specific kind of opinion on that because I can't speak for what's going to happen federally. So I'm just gonna have to kind of decline making a recommendation on that or giving my opinion on that. I'm trying to give the facts. That's what I'm trying to do.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Doty, then let me take a slightly different approach. There is always risk in qualifying under a federal tax exclusion, and individuals who chose not to pay federal income tax on this could potentially expose themselves to a federal tax liability. And we might therefore not want to create the false expectation that they are in some kind of safe harbor if under any scenario where we pass a program like this.
Correct.
Commissioner Doty.
Madam Chair, Representative Winkler, I would agree with that wholeheartedly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioner Doty. And then, so it seems likely that it will be beyond our ability to accurately predict whether we could have a federal exclusion. We can try to craft a program so that it would fit one of these exclusions. But under either scenario, it seems to me that if we're making payments directly from the state, we would have to issue a 1099 along with them. Is that
Commissioner
correct?
Madam Chair, Representative Winkler, again, I'd say I'm agreeing with that as well. And I will also note, and if I didn't say it earlier, I will say it now, given this line of questioning, is that we are in touch. We have asked this question specifically through MMB and directly to Treasury, because we want to know the answer to that as well. And there is the opportunity for Treasury to get back to us, so we would have more information on this point. I just don't feel like I'm in a position to respond directly to that.
Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Doty, then it seems to me that as we look to pass legislation to create this program, the faster we could get some kind of response back would be helpful, so that we could craft the bill in part to minimize any federal tax obligation that likelihood that individuals would have. And I'm seeing you're nodding yes, and then just kind of stating the obvious, but it is important that we have as much information as we can. And then my last point, and you might not be the right person to answer this question, but this $13 an hour under the ARPA guidance, could you talk more about that? Or is there somebody else on the call who could give a more thorough explanation of where that comes from and what that means in this context? Commissioner
Doty.
Madam Chair, Representative Winkler, I'd have to defer to either fiscal staff on that. I definitely am not the expert on the definitions under the ARPA guidelines, and I would hate to make an assumption on that one. So maybe nonpartisan staff could help us with that one.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I see Mr. Arneson is on.
All right, Mr. Arneson. Oh, there we go. Yeah, there you are. Go ahead, Mr. Arneson.
Madam Chair, members, as Representative Winkler indicated, the Treasury rule indicates that in order to qualify the premium pay under that eligible use of ARPA, the amount of premium pay means an amount up to $13 per hour, in addition to the wages that the worker has already earned, or the wages that the worker continues to earn. So that's the one limit. And then the second limit is, in aggregate, the amount of premium pay can exceed $25,000 per worker in order to be eligible for spending under this authorized use of ARPA. So just maybe to kind of put it in context, a $1,000 premium payment, for example, per hour, that's roughly 80 hours. So if the working group is thinking, the ballpark of payments is $1,000, and we're going to require that worker worked at least 80 hours over some period of time, that math works out to roughly $13 per hour. It's just one consideration that the working group will have to keep in mind if the source of funds does end up being these ARPA dollars under the premium pay use of that act.
Representative Winkler.
Madam Chair, sorry to have so many questions here. Mr. Arneson, but there's no limit on the number of hours as long as $13 per hour times X number of hours doesn't exceed 25,000. Is that correct?
Mr. Arneson.
Madam Chair, members, there's no limit on the number of hours that could be compensated with premium pay under the act, except for the $25,000 limit that Chair Winkler indicated.
Okay, thanks. And so just my general comment is the ARPA funds would be one source that we could use. We couldn't spend, there's not enough money on the bottom line at this point, even though projections indicate that there will be more after the next forecast. But if we acted before the next forecast, we would have to find some fund that is, find $250 million in some other fund that is currently not budgeted. So for example, a reserve or a cash flow account or something like that, we could spend out of that and essentially bank on that being returned to that fund after the next forecast. I think that, so I think there are ways around using the ARPA funds and those limits if that is the direction that the working group decides to go.
Oh, thank you, Representative Winkler. And Senator Kiffmeyer, did you have a question? Your hand went up and then down, and now it's up. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm being kicked off and on periodically, so thank you very much. But I've really caught everything but a few minutes of the presentation, which is very helpful. But I think, Commissioner Doty, my general question is, if we try and structure this so it's not a windfall to the state or federal government, meaning out of that $250 million, that some of that would go tax revenue to the state of Minnesota, which is really what we're trying to avoid here, and that they get the full check. We give them $250 or $1,000, that they get that full amount. So, Commissioner Doty, my question for you is, do you think, though, there is a way we could structure it before the February forecast, or it's just a matter of having to wait for the federal government to know?
Commissioner Doty.
Madam Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, great question. And I think this is what I'll say is, I think that, if we focus on what we have control over, which is, making sure that it's excluded from state tax, I think we can act on that now. I think we can make some educated assumptions, if you will, relative to maybe how Treasury is going to come down. Again, we cannot, predict exactly what Treasury is going to do, but I think that we could potentially make some of those assumptions. The committee could, and we could still move forward. Or, as you said, we could just simply wait until we do get the word from Treasury as to kind of where they're landing on this.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think we're all eager to see the funding go forward and not have to wait. But then, as Representative Winkler said, then we have a risk. I guess we'll have to just think about that more and wait and hear from Commissioner Doty, maybe an official letter from our work group. Is there anything we can do, Commissioner Doty, to help prompt that reply from the federal government?
Good question, Senator Kiffmeyer. Commissioner Doty.
Madam Chair, Senator Kiffmeyer, great question. And let me get back to you on that, quite frankly, because we're all anxious to hear from Treasury and try to get that information. And so if that is, some direct push from this committee in some way, then I will make sure that that I'm letting the committee know that, and that we can work to do that. My agency clearly is going to be pushing on that hard as well. So, but I can get back to you on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Doty. Senator Kiffmeyer.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. That's very encouraging and very helpful. Good to know. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, and Commissioner Doty, yeah, just shoot us an email if that would help your getting a quicker response from them. I'm sure all of us would gladly sign it quickly.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any more questions of Commissioner Doty on the presentation? All right, moving on. We've got 3 testifiers. First one up on my list is Dan Gorman, president of AFSCME Local 600, AFSCME Correction Policy Officer. I am looking for Mr. Gorman. I go to page 2. All right, I don't see Mr. Gorman. So Mr. Gorman, if you're there, we'll put you at the end. Next up, I did see Ms. Jolie Holland with the School Nurse Organization of Minnesota. Go ahead, Ms. Holland.
Oh, Madam Chair, thank you so much, and committee members. We appreciate you listening to us. I'm here on behalf of the licensed school nurses and the School Nurse of Minnesota organization. And basically, we cover 135,000 teachers and staff and over 800,000 children in the state of Minnesota. And as licensed school nurses, we're salaried, and we end up being with students that are potential COVID, have contracted COVID or that we're assessing for COVID. And we also do contact tracing. And a lot of times that is going into the evenings and weekends and many, many hours in order to make sure that we keep our students and staff safe. And I do believe this year might be worse with the Delta variant. And so what we are asking is that you would consider licensed school nurses as part of the frontline worker pay. And we are not able to work from our homes. We must be in the schools. And in my district, we kept a lot of the students from early childhood through in school and did some hybrid, but we were in the schools, in the trenches. And we have increased daycare. We've lost people that were helping us because some of my older workers, they can't help out due to fears about the Delta variant and last year just because there were so many unknowns. So we do have increased exposure. We do, have to work many hours above and beyond our normal hours, and we still have all our students, which the asthma, anaphylaxis, diabetes, I have probably 20 diabetic students from preschool and on up, G-tubes, seizures, mental health issues. We're seeing a lot more mental health students coming in with stomach aches, headaches, and a lot of it mimics COVID, and even our old flu, influenza, things like that. So we're really, it is a heavy burden, and it's not letting up, it's continuing. So we would really like to ask you to consider licensed school nurses in our health offices across the schools in Minnesota as part of the frontline worker pay that could be eligible for that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Holland, and thank you for being in our schools and helping out all of our kids during this COVID pandemic. It can't be very fun, but thank you. Thank you. Next up, we have Sarah Gonzalez, Deputy District Administrator from the 4th Judicial District. Ms. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair Housley and members of the working group. I'm Sarah Gonzalez, and I am the Deputy District Administrator for the 4th Judicial District, also known as Hennepin County District Court. But I'm here today to testify on behalf of the entire Minnesota Judicial Branch, so our state court system. Thank you for giving us this opportunity. On July 27th, 2021, Minnesota Supreme Court Chief Justice Lori Gilday submitted written testimony to this working group, asking you to please consider providing frontline worker pay to 911 court employees across the state, roughly a third of our statewide workforce. And I'm here today to give you some additional information about that request. To help you understand why we believe these court employees should be considered for frontline worker pay, I'm going to take you back just briefly to the spring of 2020 and talk about how our courts were serving the public during that time. In early March 2020, when the governor issued the stay-at-home order, our courts took immediate action to try to protect the health and safety of judges, staff, and our justice partners. Those are people like public defenders and jail staff, as well as the public. Those steps included suspending non-urgent court hearings and asking our judges and staff to work from home whenever possible. At the same time, we began implementing technologies that would eventually, but not right away at the beginning, allow us to transition most court hearings to online courtrooms. By May 18th, we had many of those technologies in place, and we were able to gradually resume more court operations remotely at that time. However, during that 2-month timeframe between March 13 and May 18, 2020, there remained a certain number of essential court functions and court business that we had no choice but to handle inside of our courthouses. These were essential court proceedings vital to ensuring public safety and protecting the constitutional rights of Minnesotans. Some examples are finishing trials that were already in progress when the governor's stay-at-home order was implemented, holding hearings for in-custody defendants and in-custody juveniles, holding hearings for restraining orders, for emergency housing matters that were exceptions to the eviction moratorium, and hearings to find emergency protective care for children in the foster care system. Nothing that was happening in our courthouses during that 2-month span could be considered optional. And while we would eventually find ways to conduct many of those hearings online, in those early days of the pandemic, we had no other option than to be with the public face-to-face in the courtrooms and in our courthouses. To hold those hearings, we needed to ask a variety of court staff to work in the courthouse that in jobs that required direct interaction with the public. That included our jury staff, court reporters, psychological examiners, interpreters, and various administrative staff to manage those trials and those essential courtroom hearings. It also included various staff who were working at our public service counters who were assisting the public with case filings, making payments, or other matters. As a manager working in the trial courts at that time, I can tell you, as I'm sure you've heard from other people who have testified, that it wasn't easy to ask employees to put themselves at risk by coming in and working in the courthouse. There was a tremendous amount of fear about the virus and how it was spread. And all around them, they were hearing people urging them to stay at home, socially distant, yet we were asking them to come in and work. That was the backdrop our employees faced as they kept our courthouse doors open and their work ensured that every Minnesotan had their constitutional rights protected through our courts. As I said at the beginning, we've identified 911 court staff from across our 87 district courts who provided those essential in-person services inside courthouses during those first 2 months of the pandemic. Providing them with frontline worker pay will recognize the essential nature of that work and the increased risk they faced while working with the public during those early days of the public health crisis. Thank you for your consideration, and I'm open to any questions that you have.
Thanks, Ms. Gonzalez. That was very helpful, getting some extra insight what your court staff had to go through. So please thank them from all of us on this committee too for hanging in there and continuing to do their job. I'll look again for Dan Gorman of AFSCME. I still didn't see him. So, oh wait, somebody in. Oh, there's Michelle. Go ahead, Michelle.
Chair Housley. Mr. Gorman may have gotten caught at his post, so we've been trying to make contact with him, and they're hopeful he may be able to join the meeting at 1 o'clock if it's still going, and would appreciate the opportunity to address the group at that time.
All right, thanks, Michelle. We'll see if we're still going. Members, so I'm wondering where do you think we should go from here? Representative Winkler, I don't know what you had planned for the next meeting, but it seems like we're kind of narrowing in. We've heard from a ton of our essential workers and those that are frontline. Great testimony over the last couple of weeks. But I think we kind of can sort of narrow it even further and maybe get some work done, because I think we have a deadline of September 6th. So Representative Winkler.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I think a follow-up maybe on Thursday to the conversation about criteria would be worthwhile, and having an opportunity to discuss, amongst ourselves kind of in an open format on Thursday would be helpful. I think that next week would be a time for us to kind of narrow things down. And I know that we do have a bit more agency testimony and nonpartisan staff testimony to follow up to make sure that all of our questions are answered. But my hope would be that next week, next Tuesday, Thursday, we would be ready to start discussing at least kind of a conceptual approach to, how we would allocate this money, and be ready by the close of next week to have some kind of common ground on what that package will look like. That then, I think, if we could get there, that would allow us to start working with legislative staff on drafting proposed language, vetting it with our caucuses, making sure that everybody is on board, and we could start thinking about a special session to enact it. But I do think there's a little bit more information to be had from staff, and I think we need a little bit more conversation amongst ourselves. I think we kind of know, the direction that we're generally going in the sense that, we'll have to draw a circle at some, bigger or smaller. We'll have to understand how much is available, and we'll have to work through the mechanics of how we could put together the program. But I do think through this process, from my perspective anyway, it's been really valuable to hear from a lot of people I would not have thought of as frontline workers, hearing from people who were affected by the pandemic in their health, and wanting to recognize them, and also really having it brought home to me just what our healthcare workers went through in keeping us alive, saving lives. And so, I think my thought is a little bit more discussion, a little bit more staff presentation, and next week, let's try to get at least a conceptual agreement on the kind of package we want to put together.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, Representative Winkler. This really has been helpful to wrap our heads around everybody that was essential in Frontline through this, and hearing the testimony, things that we didn't know was going on out there. So this has been extremely helpful. Commissioner Doty, if you need any help from us, let us know, because a lot hinges on what you're doing back there. So we would love to get as much information as you can, and let us know if we can help. Members, are there any other questions? Yeah, any other questions? This was a quick one. And Michelle, if you could tell Mr. Gorman of AFSCME, we're sorry he couldn't make it. Maybe he can make it one of the next meetings. But with that, members, we are going to adjourn till Thursday. And Thursday's a Zoom also, Representative Winkler?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's the expectation. I think as we move towards hopefully some kind of agreement, it might be useful next week to have a hybrid option available again, where we can maybe have some more conversation directly, which is I've found is more useful when we're actually making agreements at the legislature than doing it over Zoom.
Perfect. All right, sounds good. Members, this meeting is adjourned.
Recording stopped.